Welcome to the Chapter 4 Documenting Information Systems Part 3 pre-class lecture. What I would like to do in the next class is spend the whole class working through the exercise that we started in the last class with the physical data flow diagram and a logical data flow diagram. Give time to overflow in case we didn't finish with that, and then also work on a systems flow chart. So this is going to be briefer than the part 2 pre-class lecture, but if I can save 5 or 10 minutes of classroom time so we can roll our sleeves up and work with actually creating the data flow diagrams and systems diagram, I'm going to. So that's what we're doing here. Drawing a systems flow chart. I'd like to go over real quick some of the general rules for creating a systems flow chart. And a systems flow chart shows the whole system. And it incorporates all of the flows, all the data flows, all the data stores, so you can understand how all the flows go within a system. First thing is divide the flow chart into columns. One column for each entity. So on each end of the page, you're going to have the external entities, and in the middle, you're going to have the internal entities. And we talked about those in the prior lectures and identifying those in the data flow diagrams we're doing in class and with the Sabrina example. Flowchart columns must be laid out so that the activities flow from left to right. So just like with the logical data flow diagram, where you have to flow from internal entity number 1 to internal entity number 2 to internal entity number 3, you lay out a systems flow chart in a very similar manner. And by doing so, you minimize crossing lines and connectors, which for readability purposes, you want to keep to a minimum. And there's another point on that. Flowchart logic should flow from the top to the bottom and from left to right. So this is very similar to what we did with the context diagram, the physical data flow diagram, and also with the logical data flow diagram, where we put the external entity, the starting external entity on the far top left-hand corner, and then the ending external entity on the far bottom of the right hand. And then for clarity, put out arrows on all flow lines and have the arrows show what direction the flow is going. Keep the flow chart on one page if possible. Off-page connectors in multiple pages are required. And remember from the book where it is showing what the different symbols mean, a circle with a number in it. So if you're on page 1 and you have a circle going to 2, that takes you to page 2, which is an off-page connector, which connects one page to another page. And within the columns, there must be at least one manual process, excuse me, keying operation or data store between documents. So that's just one of the rules that within each column, you've got to have at least one process, one keying operation, or one data store between the documents. When crossing organizational lines, show the document at both ends of the flow line unless the connection is short and the intent is unambiguous. So what you want to do is, if you're going from one entity to the other, when you're crossing the line, show a document at both ends. So if you have, for instance, an example that I'm going to show in a minute, you end up having within the last internal entity printing a shipping document, have that shipping document, and then show that shipping document in the external entity with the warehouse. Documents or reports printed in a computer facility should be shown in that facilities column first. Then you can show the document report going to the destination unit. So when you're going from one entity to another entity, what you want to do is show what reports and documents being the first thing that you show. Documents or reports printed by a centralized computing facility on equipment located at another organizational unit should not be shown within the computer facility. So if you have a external computer facility Make sure you document that and don't just put that facility within that internal entity if it is not physically within that unit. Processing within an organizational unit on devices such as a PC, laptop, or computerized cash register should be shown within the unit or as a separate column next to that unit, but not in the central computer facility column. This is getting at what we were talking about in doing the diagram for Sabrina, where you have a salesman who is external to the company and not hooked up directly to the company's central computer system, but has a laptop, and the laptop ends up creating the batch that goes into the centralized computer. You don't want to show that PC and the transactions where the salesman is entering into the PC. You don't want to have that be the same thing if they're not directly connected or communicating. What you want is to have that laptop and then show the flow of the data to the centralized computer. On that same note, in the example we've shown, the salesman taking the order is separate from the laptop, so you show those separate too. And as it says here with the systems flow chart, show them in a separate column next to that unit. Sequential processing steps with no delay between them and resulting from the same input can be shown as one process or a sequence of process. What this is saying is that if you have, and we're going to do an example in class where we're going to combine updating and printing a pick list all into one activity, and you have the choice in drawing a systems flow chart of having them all within one activity, or you can have them sequentially where you list each one of them that is occurring in a sequential process. The only way to get data into or out of a computer data storage unit is through a computer processing rectangle or offline process square. So you can't just have it being in to itself. You've got to have that processing rectangle or an offline process square for data that is going into or out of a computer data storage unit. Manual process is not needed to show the sending of a document. It should be apparent from the movement of the document. So when you've got the example used in class where after the processing happens, a confirmation is sent to the customer, you don't have to have the documents being printed and then sent to the customer. It's apparent by reading the chart that that has occurred. Do not use manual processes to file documents. Show documents going into files. So you don't want to create an icon and show a manual process of a clerk filing the paper. You just want to show that document going directly into the file. Here is the Sabrina system flow chart, which is the same that we did the context diagram for, and then the logical and physical data flow diagram. You can see here what you got is the various entities. Sales rep laptop, computer, order entry clerk, and then you've got the customer entering the customer data going into the sales rep's laptop. You've got add order, and the add order goes into the daily order file that is sent as a batch at the end of the day to the headquarters. Print copy for the customer, though that is the document symbol. And you can see here that it's going to the customer rep, customer orders. That's a file symbol, so it's going into the file. And then you've got here, you've got the end of day sales order to HQ. The batch is sent to HQ, goes into the main computer. This is where the clerk reviews and compares the totals. This is the error routine, where if you were going to have the error routine, you would have to drill down further. and go to not the top level, but to a lower level systems flowchart to see what the error routine is. And then here you've got validate customer, check availability and credit. If all that is okay, then it processes customer master file is brought in, sales order master file is brought in. You can see customer master file stays the same in this process, so it's only being pulled here. But you can also see there are errors there are arrows both ways into the sales order master file, inventory master file, because they're being updated. And then you've got the accounts receivable master data file, which is coming into the validate the customer to make sure that they have the ability to make the order. And then you've got your picking tickets going to the warehouse to the customer, and then you've got your process being complete. Summary of system flow charting: strike a balance between clarity and clutter by using annotations judiciously in all page connectors whenever flow lines create clutter. So really what you're trying to do is have that balance between giving the detail you need and not having it be cluttered. And if you require detail that makes it clutter, then have all page connectors to make the system's flow chart more readable. Avoid crossing lines whenever possible. You must create a bridge, and a bridge is a half a circle. And that was one of the, when looking at what the symbols were for systems flow charts and for the data flow diagrams, a bridge is the connector that's half a circle. So don't just have a line go across another line, make sure you have the bridge. Document only normal routines and leave exception routines for another page off the flow chart. We talked about that today and in the last lecture. Moving on to documenting enterprise systems. An enterprise system we talked about in chapter 2, it integrates business processes and information from all of an organization's functional areas. It enables the coordinated operations of business functions and provide a central information resource for the organization. Put a different way, with an enterprise system, everything's going to be going into one computer system and not having a laptop and not having laptop and then batch over to the central computer. What you're going to have is have a laptop directly connected to the central computer, and the central computer is the only place where you're going to see those type of transactions be recorded or those processes recorded. It streamlines business processes, replaces paper with online reports, and automates manual systems. That's one of the things about an enterprise system, is that it cuts down on paper. And it makes the business processes where you would end up having reports within the system that are pulled up instead of paper reports, or having to pull information out external to the information system and then create reports. And it also automates manual processes. An example of that is having credit get checked automatically, as opposed to having to have a clerk in the credit department verify that the credit is available for the customer to make the sale. So what might change for Sabrina, the example that we've given and the example in the book that we've worked through in these pre-class lectures, what changes would happen with Sabrina in a enterprise system? The one thing that I can think of is you would replace paper with electronic reports. And there may be some other, but that's really the big one that I can think of, is that you wouldn't have paper. You would end up having email sent to the customer instead of having a confirmation of their order handed to them physically or mailed, and then to the warehouse and the other external entity. You would have an electronic ticket sent and not have paper printed in the warehouse or given to the warehouse. And then taking that even a step further, instead of having the person who's picking in a warehouse have a piece of paper, they would likely have a mobile device that would guide them through the warehouse to tell them what items needed to be picked. that is all I have for this pre-lecture for Chapter 4, Part 3. I appreciate you watching it. I hope it prepares you for documenting systems and creating a systems flowchart. If you have any questions, ask them at the first of class or bot me an email and I'll either answer you via the email or I'll answer your question the first thing in class. See you in class in a little bit.